Empire of Fire Part 1. Chapter 1, The Chains of Persepolis. They brought her through the gate of all nations in chains, but even bound and bloodied, she looked like a queen the Empire had tried to forget. The sun struck the golden tips of Persepolis's columns as the caravan wound up the stone road. At its center, in a cage of blackened iron, knelt Azadeh, last daughter of the fallen house of Sakardun, her once royal wrists now shackled and raw. Crowds gathered, murmuring like wind through broken banners. Some threw stones. Others only stared. No one cheered. The capital hadn't seen a rebel queen in 20 years, and the last one hadn't lived to see the palace gates. Azadeh kept her chin high. Her linen robes were torn, her hair tangled with desert dust and blood, but her gaze didn't flicker, not when the guards yanked her from the cart, not when the crowd jeered, not even when the sun hit the towering reliefs of King Cyrus's soldiers carved into the palace walls, a silent army of stone. 2 guards seized her arms. "Don't look at him," one hissed. "You're not here to speak. Only to kneel." But when they opened the grand bronze doors, she looked anyway. King Cyrus the Great sat atop a dais of lapis and gold, the royal lion standard behind him. His gaze was sharp, unreadable, like a sword balanced on edge. By his side stood a man armored in black and silver, broad-shouldered, war-scarred, and cold-eyed. General Darius. The Empire's hammer. The butcher of Sakardun. The man who had burned her people from the mountains to the sea. He looked at her not with pity, but with interest. Azadeh of the Sunblood line, the court herald intoned. Captured leading a revolt in the eastern provinces. Charged with sedition, blood treason, and defiance of the Shahanshah. Yet she stands, Darius said. His voice was calm, but it carried like thunder across the hall. And you brought her here alive. By your request, General, Cyrus said, his tone dry. You claimed she might still be of use. Azadeh laughed, a low, dry sound. So I'm to be bartered now? A prisoner for peace? You're not a prisoner, Darius replied. You're a solution. She met his gaze, dark, calculating, relentless. And what does your empire need solving, General? He stepped down from the dais, slowly, boots echoing against the stone floor. Rebellion smolders across the east. You are a symbol. A marriage to you would pacify your people. Turn you into the bridge that ends this war. Azadeh's lips curled. And if I refuse? Cyrus stood, his expression colder than carved stone. Then we display your head beside your father's. The room fell silent. Azadeh's heart thundered, but she let no fear show. She looked back to Darius. You'd marry the woman who tried to kill you? He studied her. Only if you're smart enough to stop trying. Azadeh turned her gaze toward the gilded ceiling, as if considering the gods. Then she smiled, bloody and defiant. Then give me a crown, General. Let me see how many kings I can burn with it. Chapter 2, A General's Offer. The silence after her answer was thick enough to suffocate. Then give me a crown, General. Let me see how many kings I can burn with it. Gasps rippled through the great hall. The nobles, courtiers, and magi lining the marble pillars leaned in, waiting for King Cyrus's reaction. Some expected her to be struck down where she stood. But the king only raised one eyebrow, as if amused. She has your fire, Darius, Cyrus murmured. She has something more dangerous, Darius replied. She has loyalty. Even in defeat. Cyrus descended the dais, hands clasped behind his back. He studied Azadeh as one would a fine but cracked piece of pottery, valuable once, perhaps dangerous now. You truly would marry her? He asked Darius. A daughter of the rebellion? The last spark of a bloodline I extinguished myself? She's not a spark, your majesty, Darius said. She's the fire you didn't finish burning. Azadeh smirked. You're surprisingly poetic for a war dog. He ignored her. Her people still call her Arden's light. If I take her as bride, I take the rebellion's spine. And we gain the east without another campaign. Cyrus's gaze hardened. And what do you gain? Darius met his eyes. Peace. The king's silence was its own kind of thunder. But he was a strategist at heart. He weighed costs and consequences faster than most men could blink. And right now, half the eastern satraps whispered sedition, the priests of Ahura Mazda were stirring in the fire temples, and Babylon waited for any excuse to rise. Marrying Azadeh off to his general? It might be the strangest solution. But it might also work. Still, Cyrus was no fool. You'll keep her here, he said. Within Persepolis. Under the watch of the Magi and the court. I won't risk her being the match to a second uprising. Darius nodded once. Agreed. Very well, the king said. Let the court bear witness. General Darius shall take Azadeh of Sakardun as wife. She will be bound to the empire. If she breaks that bond, he turned his gaze to her, voice dropping to steel. She dies. The herald stepped forward, voice booming. The union shall be consecrated at dusk. The rebel queen becomes the empire's daughter. Azadeh said nothing. She didn't flinch. Didn't blink. But inside her, something twisted. Her father's voice echoed from memory, never kneel. Not even when the fire eats your bones. She was not kneeling. She was infiltrating. Azadeh stood in the ceremonial robes the court had forced on her, layers of silk the color of desert sand and crimson flame. Her wrists bore golden cuffs instead of iron ones now, but somehow they felt heavier. Darius watched her from the shadows of the hall, arms crossed. You're taking this well, he said. She turned to face him. Would you rather I weep? I'm told noblewomen do. Then you've been speaking to the wrong women. He stepped forward, his black ceremonial armor traded for a looser indigo robe. There were old battle scars across his hands, the kind that didn't fade, the kind that told stories without needing words. I didn't marry you for your smile, he said. Good, Azadeh replied. Because I didn't accept for your charm. A long silence stretched between them. Then Darius said, You'll be watched. Every step. The king still doubts you. So do I. She tilted her head. Then why take the risk? He hesitated. Because if I'm going to burn this rebellion out of the empire, I need to understand what feeds it. And maybe I need you to show me. Azadeh approached him slowly. The firelight danced across her face, bringing out the gold in her eyes. You don't understand rebellion, General. You've only ever crushed it. Rebellion is born when a throne forgets why it stands. He stared at her. Then, with a voice low and grim, then teach me, Lady Azadeh. But remember, should you try to set this empire on fire again, I burn with it. And I always take my enemies with me. She smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less. That night, beneath the polished obsidian dome of the fire temple, they were wed by the high magus. No prayers. No feast. Only ritual, and flame. And though she wore gold, and though she was called bride, Azadeh felt only one thing. The war wasn't over. It had only just changed shape. Chapter 3, The Wedding and the Warning. The wedding of a rebel queen to the empire's mightiest general should have been a spectacle for the ages. Instead, it was a ceremony carved in silence. The court of Persepolis, usually a theater of whispers and gold-drenched flattery, stood stiff and watchful, cloaked in the hush of political discomfort. The nobles attended not out of joy, but fear. The priests murmured invocations not to bless love, but to bind allegiance. This was not a union. It was a ceasefire in silk. Beneath the obsidian dome, the temple's eternal flame cast flickering shadows over the circular chamber. The air was thick with incense and the scent of burning myrrh. The high magus, Zarvan, stood between the bride and groom, his robe edged in gold thread, his gaze sharp beneath his hood. "Let fire bear witness to this bond," Zarvan intoned. "Let the holy breath of Ahura Mazda seal their oath. Let not love guide this union, but loyalty to empire." Azadeh stood still, her face a flawless mask. Behind her veil of translucent crimson silk, her mind worked like a swordsmith at the forge. Every detail was a clue. Every glance a weapon. Every silence a scream. Where was Cyrus? The king had not come. His throne sat empty on its golden dais, like an unspoken threat. Beside her, Darius was a statue of war. Clad in ceremonial black and gold, he didn't look at her. Not once. His hands remained steady as he accepted the ritual cord that bound their wrists. Azadeh felt the braided fabric tighten around her skin, felt the bite of fate threading her to the very man who'd crushed her homeland. Zarvan's voice echoed, "If either breaks their vow, let fire consume them. If either betrays their bond, let the gods strike swift and without mercy." In the old tongue, Darius spoke the binding phrase. "By the blade and the flame, I bind my oath." Azadeh hesitated. Just long enough for the priest to stiffen. Then she said it too, louder than expected, clear and sharp. "By the blade and the flame, I bind my oath." The flame in the temple roared upward. The court let out a single breath, as if it had forgotten how. The feast was small, tense, and utterly joyless. Azadeh sat at the long stone table surrounded by cold eyes. Nobles whispered behind silver cups. Satraps from the eastern provinces refused to toast. The high priest remained eerily quiet, watching her as if he were waiting for her to speak blasphemy. She toyed with her wine but didn't drink. At her side, Darius had still not spoken to her since the binding. Let him play the statue. She had other concerns. Because someone had left her a message. Hidden inside the folds of her ceremonial sash, a slip of parchment had been folded into the lining. She'd found it during the final hour of preparation, pressed between the embroidered flame sigils. It read only. "The walls have teeth. Trust no one. They're watching him now." Her heart had raced when she saw it. Only one person signed their messages that way. Tyria. Her handmaid. Her friend. Her last true ally. She scanned the room now, but Tyria was nowhere among the servers or attendants. That meant she was deep in hiding, or worse. Across the table, the Magi were murmuring among themselves. Zarvan caught her glance and gave a small, unreadable smile. Azadeh's new chambers were cold and silent. She had not yet spoken to Darius in private. He'd left the feast early, claiming matters of state, but the shadows under his eyes told her otherwise. He was unraveling something. So was she. A silk-robed attendant, not one of hers, brought her a bowl of pomegranate seeds and chilled wine. She accepted it with caution. The servant bowed too low. Too long. Something prickled at her neck. As soon as the woman turned and exited the room, Azadeh slid her dagger, still hidden in her sleeve from the ceremony, into her hand and turned the bowl over. Nothing. Then she noticed the wine. A tiny shimmer at the surface. Almost imperceptible. She dipped a piece of linen into it. It came away blue. Poison. Subtle. Slow. Designed to kill over days. She stood, furious. Not because someone had tried to kill her, but because someone had dared to do it this soon. Then, footsteps. The door creaked open. Darius entered, removing his cloak. "You missed a toast," she said calmly, hiding the evidence beneath a nearby scroll. "I dislike celebrations I didn't earn." He looked exhausted. Bruised, not from battle, but from pressure. She saw it now, not just a general, but a man walking a knife's edge between court politics, war, and a king who might not trust him anymore. "I imagine the Magi weren't pleased with our union," she said. He approached her slowly. "The Magi weren't meant to be pleased. They were meant to watch." "Watch whom?" "You." A pause. "And me." She turned, locking eyes with him. "Then you'd best keep them guessing, husband." He looked at her a long time. "You're not safe here." A heartbeat. "Neither are you," she replied, and tossed the poisoned linen at his feet. Chapter 4, Whispers Behind the Curtain. The poison hadn't just been a message. It had been a test. Azadeh didn't sleep that night. While the court murmured behind silk and marble, while the Magi lit midnight fires in the Temple of Oracles, and while her husband sat in a council chamber until dawn, Azadeh roamed her quarters like a caged lioness, eyes fixed on every candle's shadow and listening to every crack in the stone walls. Because someone had wanted her dead before her second breath as a bride. And someone else had warned her in time. A new handmaid entered with her breakfast tray. A young girl with trembling hands and a burn mark across her wrist. Azadeh waited until the girl set the tray down and stepped back with a bow. Then, quietly, "Where is Tyria?" The girl flinched. "Gone, my lady." Azadeh's gaze sharpened. "Gone where?" "They took her last night." "Temple guards." "She was caught near the flame archive." Azadeh's heart dropped, but she kept her expression stone still. She dismissed the girl, then sat at the vanity table in silence, staring at her reflection. They were trying to break her apart, piece by piece, ally by ally, until she was alone inside this empire of fire and lies. But they didn't know her strength was forged in loss. And it was growing hotter by the day. General Darius stood with arms folded as King Cyrus addressed the High Council, a circular room of pale marble, filled with governors, priests, commanders, and one empty throne in the center. "The East remains unsettled," Cyrus said, pacing the room. "News came this morning, the satrap of Hyrcania was assassinated. His bloodline ends with him." A murmur swept through the room. "The rebels claim responsibility?" Darius asked. "No," Cyrus's eyes narrowed. "No one does." That was worse. Because the kind of silence that followed an assassination without a claim meant something darker than rebellion. It meant internal betrayal. Zarvan, the High Magus, cleared his throat. "There are whispers among the Magi that your general's new bride has already begun sending secret letters to the mountain tribes." Darius shot him a sharp look. "She's under constant guard. And yet her influence flows without her hands," Zarvan replied smoothly. "Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is not a sword, but memory." Cyrus looked between them. "Perhaps we moved too quickly with this union," the king said. Darius didn't flinch. "Perhaps you forget I was the one who crushed her rebellion. And yet you sleep beside it." The council stilled. The king was testing him. Darius stepped forward. "If I had any doubt she posed a threat, I would deal with it. Personally." The room exhaled. But Zarvan's smile did not fade. Azadeh wandered the outer gardens near the royal archives, where ivy climbed over ancient lion carvings and the air smelled of sweet rosewater and sun-baked stone. A figure moved beside her, silent as wind. Lord Kurash, a distant cousin of the king, more scholar than noble, but sharp-eyed and serpent-tongued. He walked with a carved cane, even though Azadeh had never seen him limp. "A curious day for a walk," my lady, he said. The scent of treason's quite strong. Treason, she said coolly, is often just ambition without permission. He smiled. You'll do well here. Provided you learn which ears not to trust. Are you offering yours? Offering? No. Selling, perhaps. Azadeh stopped near a low fountain shaped like a lion's mouth. Then tell me, who tried to poison me? Lord Kurash tilted his head. Many in this court would prefer you silenced. But only one has the reach, the arrogance, and the holy justification to act so quickly. He tapped his cane twice on the stone path. Zarvan. Of course. The priest had opposed her marriage from the beginning. And with Tyria now in his grasp, his message was clear: power does not forget those who challenge it. Why hasn't he finished the job? She asked. Kurash shrugged. Because you're not the only flame rising in the dark. Something older is waking, my lady. And Zarvan doesn't want a martyr, he wants a weapon. Or ashes. Azadeh's pulse quickened. What's waking? But the noble only bowed. And when he stood again, he whispered. Ask your husband about the tomb beneath the throne. And what sleeps inside it. Azadeh stormed in without knocking. Darius was alone, poring over reports, dressed in black without armor, his hair damp from the baths. He didn't even look up. You shouldn't be here. I'm your wife. Exactly. Azadeh placed her hands on the table between them. Why didn't you tell me the king is guarding something beneath Persepolis? He froze. Then slowly lifted his gaze. Who told you? Someone with more answers than you've given me. A pause. Then Darius said softly, because what lies beneath this palace is not for mortal hands. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? She asked. That you're protecting the empire from ghosts and prophecy? Or are you afraid I'll find it before you do? His jaw clenched. Whatever it is, General, she whispered, Zarvan wants it. And he's removing everyone between him and it, starting with my people. I've kept you alive. No. I've kept myself alive. The tension between them crackled, like a storm waiting to split the sky. Then, slowly, she turned and walked away. Just before the door closed, she said. Watch your back, Darius. You married into war. And I'm not the one who started it. Chapter 5, The Flame Beneath the Throne. Some secrets are not buried. They are sealed, and they wait for someone bold or broken enough to open them. Azadeh moved through the dark like a phantom. She wore a servant's robe, stolen from an unattended laundry cart hours ago. Her hair was bound beneath a plain scarf. No guards challenged her, not here, not this deep within the palace where the scent of ink and parchment clung to every stone. The royal archives were a labyrinth of forgotten knowledge. Columns rose like trees between walls of reed scrolls, stone tablets, and bound scripts older than the empire itself. Fire bowls glowed softly at every 10th pillar, casting shadows that whispered against the floors. She walked past annals of conquest. Dust-choked maps. Family trees written in blood. And finally, she found it. A lion carved into black stone. Eyes of lapis. A mouth open in an eternal roar. But not just a carving, a hidden door, cleverly fused into the wall. The lion was ancient, untouched by the modern architecture of the rest of the hall. Azadeh reached into her sleeve and drew out a broken bronze pendant she'd worn as a child, a relic of her dynasty, all that remained of the house of Sakardun. She pressed it into the lion's eye. A soft click echoed. Stone shifted. The mouth opened, not roaring, but yawning. A cold breath of air escaped from within. She stepped inside. The descent was steep. Old steps spiraled downward, rough-hewn, their edges worn by centuries of silence. Torches flickered to life as she passed, lit not by her touch, but by something that sensed her presence. Her fingers brushed the hilt of her concealed dagger. Magic was not supposed to exist anymore. The Magi claimed to have sealed the last of it after the War of the Flameborn. But magic did not care for declarations. And neither did prophecy. At the bottom of the steps lay a circular chamber. Unlike the warmth of Persepolis above, this place breathed with cold fire, a paradox of temperature, where the air shimmered like heat but chilled her to the bone. In the center stood a platform of obsidian stone. Upon it, sealed in layers of gold chain and marked with symbols she barely recognized, was a sarcophagus, not of a king, but of a weapon. The flame-bound tomb. She stepped closer. Carving surrounded the base in the old tongue, the same one she'd read as a girl in her father's ruined libraries. She traced the first line with her fingers. To break the chain, one must bleed willingly. Another line. To awaken the flame, the bloodline must return. Azadeh's breath caught. It was her. Her line. Her blood. A groan echoed from behind her. She spun around, dagger drawn, but no one stood in the tunnel. Then she realized. The sarcophagus was responding to her presence. The golden chains trembled slightly, as if awakening. And just before she could retreat, a whisper rose from beneath the lid, not in words, but in fire. A memory. A warning. She saw flashes. A crown of fire resting on a woman's brow. An empire built from glass and ash. A man with Darius's eyes, but not his face, burning from the inside out. And a voice that said only, she must choose between love and flame. And one will consume the other. Azadeh staggered back. The light flickered, and then extinguished. Darkness swallowed the tomb. She turned and fled up the stairs, heart hammering, the pendant clutched in her shaking hand. As she emerged, breathless, from the lion's mouth, she found someone waiting for her in the shadows. Zarvan. The high magus stood like a black tower, hood lowered, hands folded over a polished wooden staff. You walk in places forbidden, my lady, he said, voice soft, almost sympathetic. I'm just reading, she lied, still panting. Your archives are quite welcoming. You awakened the chamber, he said simply. It has not stirred in 500 years. She said nothing. Zarvan stepped forward, slowly. There are two kinds of fire, Azadeh of Sakardun. One that warms. One that devours. You must decide which you are. She met his gaze. Why do you care? Because I've seen what happens when fire burns without direction. And because the last time your bloodline touched that tomb, this empire nearly fell. He turned to go, but paused before disappearing down the corridor. And if you think your husband doesn't know about the tomb, ask him who ordered the chains. Azadeh burst in. Darius looked up from the table, eyes narrowed. Again? Tell me about the tomb, she said. He stood slowly. What did you see? You knew, she snapped. You knew it would call to me. I didn't want to believe it would. Why? She demanded. Because if it does, he said quietly, then you're the end of all this. She stared at him, blood cold, fire rising. And for the first time since their union, Darius looked afraid, not of her, but of what she represented. Azadeh of Sakardun. The girl the flame remembered. The woman the empire couldn't chain. Chapter 6, Blades in the Garden. Assassins move faster when the empire holds its breath. The garden was a courtly masterpiece, lush hedges trimmed in perfect spirals, pools of clear water lined with coins, and the copper rose trees for which it was named, metal blooms forged by the artisans of Elam, gilded with veins of real gold. They shimmered under the fading sun like living fire. It was meant to be an evening of peace. King Cyrus had ordered a private gathering of his highest officials, a display of unity following the controversial marriage of General Darius and Azadeh. But peace, in Persepolis, was just a performance. And tonight, someone had rewritten the final act. Azadeh arrived on Darius's arm, dressed in a sheer crimson robe embroidered with flame sigils, a statement, not a submission. The court watched her as if waiting for her to misstep, to breathe too deeply, to smirk inappropriately. They were disappointed. She was regal, cold, untouchable. High Magus Zarvan stood beneath a pomegranate tree, speaking quietly with a Babylonian envoy. His eyes, however, never left Azadeh. Lord Kurash, cane tapping, mingled between wine tables like a cat weaving between shadows. And Cyrus, dressed in indigo and bronze, presided from a marble bench carved to resemble a lion's spine, hands clasped like a god pretending not to play games. The moment the ceremonial wine was poured, Azadeh felt it, the air shifted. She caught a flicker of motion near the hedge wall. A glint of steel. A shadow out of place. Then, a scream. A blade shot through the air, not at her, but toward Cyrus. Darius moved first. He shoved the king sideways as a throwing knife embedded itself into the lion throne behind him with a vicious thunk. Before anyone could cry out, 3 figures cloaked in desert gray vaulted over the hedge. Steel hissed in the air. Servants fled. Nobles shrieked. The garden became a chaos of overturned tables, crushed flowers, and screaming officials. Azadeh ducked beneath a platter and drew the hidden dagger from her sleeve, not for defense, but for clarity. Because as the assassins charged, she saw it. One of them wore the Sacredun sunburst tattoo across his collarbone. Her symbol. Her people. But she hadn't ordered this. Darius moved like fire over dry grass. He blocked the first assassin's blow with a flick of his wrist, then drove his blade up under the man's ribs. A twist. A collapse. Gone. The second charged from behind. Azadeh screamed a warning, too late. Darius spun, caught the attacker mid-strike, and used the man's momentum to throw him into a copper rose tree. Thorns impaled him. He twitched once, then went still. The third assassin, faster than the rest, lunged straight at Azadeh. She ducked. Slashed. Missed. He grabbed her by the hair, dragging her toward the edge of the pool. Her feet kicked. Her dagger dropped. He hissed into her ear, "The flame dies tonight." But then. A single arrow struck him through the eye. He dropped like a cut thread. Azadeh whirled around, heart pounding. Lord Kurash stood calmly at the far end of the garden, lowering a golden bough. It would seem, he said to no one in particular, that not all wedding guests wished the couple well. The garden stank of blood and broken blossoms. The guards had arrived too late. Cyrus sat stiffly, the knife that had nearly taken his life still quivering in the throne behind him. Azadeh knelt, chest heaving, blood on her robe, not hers. Darius stood beside her, silent. Zarvan appeared moments later, eyes already suspicious. "These men were not locals," he said. "Desert-born. Trained." Cyrus's face was unreadable. "Are they yours?" he asked Azadeh quietly. "No," she said. But no one looked convinced. Especially not Darius. Azadeh paced the floor of her chamber, shaking with fury. Someone had used her bloodline, her symbol, to make it look like she'd betrayed her new position. That she was secretly commanding assassins. And whoever it was had nearly succeeded. The message was clear, she was being set up. The door slammed open. Darius entered, face tight. "You knew they were coming," he growled. "If I had, do you think I'd be standing here?" One of them bore your crest. It was planted, she snapped. You know that. I don't know anything anymore, he shouted. Every time I try to believe you're not the enemy, blood spills. She stepped toward him, eyes burning. And what about you? Did you know about the tomb beneath the throne? About the prophecy I'm now apparently part of? You hid that from me too. They stared at each other, breath hot, eyes locked. Then something shifted. The tension snapped, not into violence, but heat. He stepped closer. You are a storm, he said. And you, she whispered, are the fool who married it. They didn't kiss. But the silence between them crackled like lightning. Far beneath the palace, in a sealed vault, Zarvan knelt before a brazier of black fire. The prophecy stirs, he whispered. The bloodline awakens. But the chain is not yet broken. Behind him, two robed figures stepped from the shadows. One placed a wrapped bundle on the floor, a severed head in blood-soaked cloth. The assassin failed, Zarvan murmured. But the seeds of doubt were planted, said the second figure. And from the shadows, a third voice whispered. Let the Empire burn. But let her light the match. Chapter 7, Ashes of Trust. Betrayal does not begin with a knife. It begins with silence. Torchlight flickered off the sweat-slicked stone walls as Azadeh followed Darius down the winding stairwell into the bowels of the imperial dungeon. The corridor reeked of iron, blood, and the echoes of pain. She had insisted on coming. He had insisted she not. And neither had yielded. Now, both walked in silence, the air between them heavier than the chains on the prisoner they were about to face. At the final chamber, a guard stepped aside and unlocked the iron-barred door with a reluctant glance at Darius. He's conscious, the general asked. Barely, the guard replied. But talking. Inside, slumped against the wall, the last surviving assassin from the garden ambush bled from the mouth, his arms shackled above his head. He was young, no older than 20, and his face bore the unmistakable sunburst tattoo of Sakardun. Azadeh's symbol. Her past. Her guilt. Azadeh stepped forward first. Her voice was calm, almost soft. Where did you train? The prisoner lifted his head, one eye swollen shut. Karkesh, he rasped. The Black Mountain camps. She narrowed her eyes. Those were abandoned after my father's death. They reopened, he hissed. For you. She froze. I never gave such an order. Didn't need to. You lived. That was enough. Darius moved beside her. Who sent you to the garden? Was it Zarvan? A noble? Another satrap? The prisoner gave a broken laugh. You still think this is about politics? It's about vengeance. You made her kneel. We rose. Azadeh's voice cracked. I never knelt. The prisoner's gaze found hers, defiant even in pain. Then you should have died a rebel, not married into the throne. Before Darius could ask another question, the prisoner twisted violently and bit down on something hidden between his teeth. His body convulsed. Foam bloomed at his lips. He slumped. Dead. Azadeh staggered back a step, stunned. Darius cursed and pounded his fist against the wall. Poison capsule. Planted before we even got him. That means someone knew he'd fail, Azadeh said. Someone expected him to be captured. And made sure he wouldn't speak. They stared down at the corpse. A boy. A weapon. A message. And neither of them knew who had written it. Word spread fast in Persepolis. Before midday, whispers ran like wildfire through the palace halls. Azadeh's people had risen again, this time inside the capital itself. Cyrus summoned an emergency session of the royal court. 3 assassins, he said, and all marked with the sunburst. This is no coincidence. Zarvan stepped forward, looking pleased in his restraint. It is proof. The flame responds to her blood. And fire, as always, devours. All eyes turned to Azadeh. She met the king's gaze with unwavering calm. You are not afraid of me, your majesty. You are afraid of what I might awaken. Cyrus's voice was flat. That's not a denial. I have no control over what ghosts rise in my name. But neither do you. Darius stepped forward, placing himself visibly between the king and his wife. Let her speak, he said. Cyrus raised an eyebrow. You forget your place, General. No, Darius said. I remember it. I stand between this empire and the war that brews beneath our feet. She is not the cause of it. She is the key to stopping it. Azadeh glanced at him sharply. For once, he hadn't spoken to dominate or interrogate. He had defended her. And that frightened her more than any blade. Azadeh stood before a silver mirror, staring at her reflection as if hoping it would blink first. Her thoughts were a whirl of burning memories, faces she hadn't seen in years now risen in rebellion under her name. What would her father think of her now? A queen without a crown. A bride without peace. A spark in a kingdom soaked in oil. The door creaked open. Darius entered, removing his armor piece by piece. He was quiet tonight, not out of anger, but fatigue. Emotional, not physical. Thank you, she said suddenly. He paused, startled. For standing up for me in the council, she clarified. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. I didn't do it for you. Her smile was bitter. Of course not. You did it for the Empire. I did it, he said slowly, because I believe you when you say you're not behind this. And if I'm wrong, I'd rather die for trusting you than live knowing I helped destroy the last hope this empire has. She turned to him. And for the first time, saw him not as her enemy, not even as her husband, but as a man who was slowly, dangerously, becoming something more. I don't know if I can be what they want me to be, she said. The rebel. The queen. The flame. Then be what they fear instead. A long silence passed. Then she asked, what did you see in the tomb, before it was sealed? He looked up at her, eyes shadowed with memory. Not fire, he whispered. Then what? A voice. Calling your name. Chapter 8, The Forgotten Relic. Not all relics are made of gold. Some are made of memory, and blood. The storm had moved from whispers to weather. Assassins in the garden. A dead prisoner. Darius's open defiance of the king. Now, the court pulsed with a feverish silence. No one spoke in the open. Not about the prophecy. Not about Azadeh. But beneath that silence, something deeper stirred. Azadeh was no longer simply surviving. She was searching. And what she sought lay beyond the reach of any throne. She moved swiftly through the inner sanctum of the Magi, a vaulted corridor hidden behind the Temple of Oracles. It was a place few were permitted, and none without blood right or royal seal. She had both. And she carried the third key, the pendant of Sacredun, which pulsed faintly against her chest like a second heartbeat. Behind her, Lord Kurash followed in silence. The strange court noble had offered his aid again, unasked, untrusted, but undeniably useful. You still haven't told me why you're helping me, Azadeh murmured, eyes scanning the carvings along the walls. Kurash's cane tapped gently as he walked. Because I enjoy watching history correct its mistakes. And what mistake is that? The Empire, he said softly, chose the wrong queen. They reached a final sealed door, smooth stone inlaid with silver fire script. Azadeh pressed the pendant to the markings. The door shuddered. A low, melodic tone hummed from within. And the stone parted down the middle, revealing a narrow chamber with a circular platform in the center. Atop it lay a sealed scroll case, golden, with black scorch marks around its cap. Its surface bore the mark of the ancient Flamebearer sigil, a hand wrapped in flame, fingers outstretched toward the sky. Azadeh stepped closer. The air changed. Heavier. Denser. As if memory itself hung here, still breathing. She touched the scroll case. It was warm. And then, it opened. Without force. Without command. As if recognizing her. Inside was no parchment, but a folded sheet of hammered obsidian etched with lines of copper that glowed faintly as she held it. The words were in the tongue of the first Flamebearer Queens, long dead, long banned. But Azadeh had learned it in secret, long ago, in the desert ruins with Tyria whispering in her ear. She began to read aloud. When the flame forgets her name, the sky shall split. When the air is bound in gold, the empire shall crack. Only she who carries the fire and the wound may break the chain. The light in the room dimmed. Azadeh's breath caught. Kurash stepped beside her. You know what it means, don't you? She nodded slowly. I'm not meant to rule the empire. You're meant to end it. Darius stood at the edge of a war map, hands braced against the table. Before him, scouts relayed the news. The eastern provinces had not quieted. Instead, they had begun rallying under the fire banner again. But this time, it wasn't a rogue commander or opportunistic satrap. It was a name. A name whispered on every soldier's lips. Every fire temple's shadow. Azadeh. She's not behind this, Darius said coldly. But they believe she is, the scout insisted. That's all that matters now. Azadeh stared at the obsidian sheet, heart racing. If the prophecy was real, if her blood could truly awaken something hidden beneath the throne, then she was not just a symbol. She was a weapon. And worse, someone was trying to use her before she could even understand what she was. Kurash leaned on his cane. There's something else, he said. Another relic. One not of stone or scroll, but bone. Azadeh looked up sharply. The original crown, he said. The one forged in flame. It was never buried with the Flame Queens. It was hidden beneath Persepolis, before even Cyrus rose to power. The tomb beneath the throne, she whispered. He nodded. But it's not a tomb for the dead. It's a cradle for the flame. And the only way in is through fire, she finished. Azadeh sat across from Darius. Neither of them touched their meal. He stared at her with something unreadable. Not suspicion. Not anger. Fear. You found something, he said. She nodded. The first Flamebearer scroll. It confirms everything the prophecy said. Then tell me, he said quietly, what you plan to do with it. Azadeh looked at him. At the man who had once hunted her. At the man who had protected her. At the man who could, one day soon, be forced to kill her. She stood slowly. When the time comes, she said, you'll have to decide what you're loyal to. He rose. Is that a threat? No, she said softly. It's a warning. One I may not get to give again. And before he could answer, she pressed a sealed copy of the scroll into his hands and left the chamber in silence. Zarvan knelt before the black brazier once more. This time, he was not alone. In the shadows stood a girl in servant's robes, her eyes hollow, her voice low. She found the scroll, she said. Zarvan didn't move. And the relic? She knows where it is. He smiled. The fire cannot be stopped, he whispered. But it can be redirected. He rose, spreading his arms. Let her find the crown. Let her awaken the tomb. And when she does, we'll take the fire from her bones. Chapter 9, The Prison Beneath Gold. Every empire hides a grave it cannot explain. Persepolis built itself upon one. The door was not supposed to exist. Carved into the marble base beneath the lion throne of King Cyrus, it looked like part of the palace floor, white stone, veined with gold. Only when viewed from the farthest end of the hall, in the exact light of the dying torch behind the second pillar, did it appear. A single golden seam, circular in shape. Ancient. Perfect. Azadeh pressed the obsidian scroll fragment to the gold. It melted into the stone like wax into fire. The seal hissed. The floor opened. No one else had come. Not even Kurash. Not Darius. This was a journey she had to take alone. A spiral stairwell curved downward, every step carved with old tongue inscriptions. Azadeh's fingertips brushed the walls as she walked, the stone pulsing faintly beneath her touch, alive with dormant flame. She had no torch. Yet the way ahead glowed faintly, lit by veins of molten copper running through the stone, like fire blood in an empire's buried heart. Whispers began as she descended. Voices, faint and layered, speaking in Old Sakarduni, her mother tongue, now outlawed in most of the empire. The flame chooses her. She remembers the forgotten name. Blood is not inheritance. Will is. Azadeh's pulse pounded in her ears. This was not a tomb. This was a prison. And something had been waiting to be remembered. At the base of the stairwell stood a massive circular chamber, its walls ringed with fireless braziers. In the center stood a raised altar of black glass, cracked, scorched, and bound in chains of golden iron etched with runes. Floating above it, encased in glass, was a crown. Not gold. Not silver. Bone white. Forged from the spine of something ancient, each prong carved into a flame, each tip tipped in red gold crystal. Azadeh stepped forward, breath catching. It pulsed with recognition. The crown of the Flamebearer Queens. She walks in shadow, but carries fire. The whisper was no longer distant. It came from the altar itself. And from beneath it, movement. Azadeh stepped closer, and then stopped. Bound by chains beneath the altar was a man. Or what once had been. He lay against the black glass floor, limbs gaunt but intact, his skin gray-gold, like ash dusted with ember. His eyes were shut, but his lips moved. Whispering in her name. She dropped to her knees. Who are you? The figure stirred. A tremor ran through the floor. Then, in a voice like wind through flame. I am the flame that fell. His eyes opened, white fire within void black scara. He smiled. It was both gentle and horrifying. Azadeh, he said, as if tasting the word. I have waited through 3 empires for you. She stood slowly. You know me? I know your line. Your voice. Your wound. You carry the memory. And the key. She raised the pendant. No, he said. You are the key. The crown above them shimmered. Why were you sealed here? She asked. Because the empire feared fire would think for itself. What are you? Once, I was a guardian of the first queen. Then, I became her punishment. He looked to the crown. She tried to end the world with it. I tried to stop her. We both failed. So they sealed me here, with the memory of the flame. Azadeh stepped toward the altar. What happens if I take it? You remember. Everything? No, he said. You remember your choice. The one every flamebearer must face. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the glass. Images surged into her mind, flames over a golden city, screams, queens burning on their own pyres, a man who looked like Darius but wasn't, kneeling in blood. Then, a blade through a throne. Her own hand holding it. Azadeh pulled away, gasping. The vision faded. The chained man watched her with eyes that no longer blinked. You are not here to wear the crown, he said. You are here to decide who must. Before she could respond, a tremor rocked the chamber. A sharp pain cut through her chest. Her pendant cracked, just slightly, sending a spark into the air. She wasn't alone anymore. Footsteps echoed above. Multiple sets. Someone had followed her. Or worse, had let her enter, and waited for her to awaken the chamber. She turned to the chained man. Can I free you? No, he said. But you can free it. The crown? No, his voice dropped into a whisper. The fire inside you. She stepped back. The braziers on the walls flared. The chamber groaned. And above, the golden hatch began to close. Azadeh sprinted up the stairwell, the whispers behind her rising to a crescendo. Not in warning. In worship. She returns. She remembers. She chooses. As the floor sealed shut behind her, a final whisper followed like a breath against her skin. Fire does not bow. It burns. So will you.
Across every empire, every forgotten age, stories still whisper. If this tale stirred your spirit, leave a like to honor the echoes of the past. Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice weaves a new legend into the sands of time. And subscribe to our YouTube channel Historical Fantasy Stories, where myths walk beside history, and every discovery changes the world. The next forgotten legend is waiting to be found.